Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. As always, I am Edward, and you are you. Welcome. Before I get started, a quick note to remember I am actually dog sitting as I record this, so there may be three guest stars that may make appearances either because they want to chime in with an opinion or they might jump up and join me here on the couch and say hello to you, or they could continue to nap. It all depends on what they decide to do. So just know that there may be some guest stars this week, or there may not. I'm not sure what Harper, Maggie, and Kira are going to do, but they're here, and nonetheless, they are trying to figure out why I'm talking to a little box on a tripod. So what caught my attention recently is I don't want to use their name. If you truly want to know, reach out and drop me a DM or a message on any of my socials, and we could talk about it. But a well-known blogger in the DS community did a post, and they talked about how all dominants, they that dominants are Mm, well, they're magnetic and that they have this outgoing personality, sort of like the magnetic extroverted person. And that sort of it struck me wrong. And my immediate reaction is like, oh my God, this is bullshit. And I normally don't react that strongly, but I really did to this, and it surprised me. And so I looked at myself first. I thought, okay, I overreacted for some reason. I know I don't fit that mold, so I probably took it personally, and then I started going down the rabbit hole of research, which, well, that means going down the rabbit hole of research and looking for actual scientific studies means that I am probably not a good candidate to work in the Trump administration because I actually believe in science. Anyway, so I did. I started looking at, what constitutes a magnetic personality. That was sort of my first stop on the rabbit hole of research. And there are three main traits that I discovered. First is presence. Somebody with that magnetic personality, they walk into a room and they have presence. They seem to make everyone feel seen and heard. And that's the first category. Next is their warmth. They feel warm and inviting to everybody in that room. Not only do they have that, where people are drawn to them, but they also just sort of like have this radiation thing that radiates warmth. And so they feel approachable. And then finally, in the big kicker, and I think this is where it gets sort of brought into the DS world, is that they have a power. Somehow they have this influential ability to project power, to make change, to impact, whatever it is they want to impact. They have this ability to make change and have power. So I think that's where that kind of comes into the DS sphere, especially is that power part of the magnetic persona. And then, of course, since they're saying that everyone is all dominants are magnetic and they're extroverts. I was curious how many people in the general population out there, uh, you know, actually identify as being an extrovert. So I was surprised. It wasn't as high as I thought. Introverts, statistically, about 30% of the population. Extroverts, they're about 30% too. And the biggest category of what people identify as are called ambiverts. Ambiverts, sorry about that. Actually, was a new word for me. And that's people who identify as sort of in the middle. They're not an extrovert, they're not an introvert, they're somewhere in the middle, and that's where I am, and that's about 40% of the population that identify that way. So it was kind of surprising to see that extroverts and introverts are, you know, basically kind of a third of the population each. So that was surprising to me, and then it got me thinking about my own life and my own story. And I got thinking back to when I first went off to college, that experience where my parents had just finished moving me into the dorms, and they were about to head back home, and it was sort of like that, oh, that, I don't know, hallmark moment. And my mom made it a point to tell me that no one here knows me, so I don't have to be what everyone is expecting. I can finally just be myself. And that was some advice that was really impactful for me in my life. And sort of as I've thought back on the subject, how does that relate to extroverted magnetic dominance? And what it taught me is that even though I was a shy, nerdy, geeky kid when I went off to college, I was able to be myself. I was able to learn who I was, um, and that, your identity can shift. You can learn to take on different roles if you want. You can, in my case, I didn't know anybody, so I started, going door to door in my dorm and introducing myself to people. Some people I became friends with, some people I just knew, and other people were like, "Ugh, don't want to hang out with them, just because of either a click or no click." But yet your identity can shift and grow as you do. And dominance is, for me, one of those roles that can shift, grow, and change as you grow and change. It is not something set in stone. We're not, I guess, born dominant, or if we have certain personality traits, we're not sort of locked into a role in the lifestyle. It's a because of our personality or our magnetism or lack thereof. And in fact, I am going to drag Sailor, my submissive, into this conversation. And she is outgoing, definitely an extrovert, and very socially magnetic. If there's an event, she's the one of the two of us that you're going to remember meeting more than likely. She just has an innate knack for attracting people to her and interacting with people. She has that magnetic pull to her. And I'm not just saying that because we as a relationship, we're magnetically sort of pulled together, but that's just her personality. And I think the kind of how this applies to the rebuttal of the extroverted magnetic dominant is, in my relationship, Sailor is the magnetic one. Um, but I don't need the spotlight on me. And neither does she. It's just who she is that the spotlight naturally finds her. But personality and role are, once again, all independent. They're choices. And, you know, I'm the dominant, she's the submissive. But according to the the mythology that's out there about DS, is, she should be the dominant one because she is the magnetic extrovert. And I'm, sort of, I can be extroverted. I definitely have taught myself that skill because, especially with the line of work that I do, I know how to, work a room, but it's a learned skill. Where for Sailor, it's natural, it's who she is, and just how she rolls. So, yeah, my own personal life and relationship don't fit this mythology. Um, and so, with that being the case, as I continued to go down the rabbit hole of the magnetic dominant and the extroverted magnetic dominant, um, I started finding there's actual research that backs my "this is bullshit" first reaction, first overreaction, backs it up. And the first actually is a new study that was published this year by people at the University of Rome in Italy, um, and a few other universities that are associated with it. If you're curious, drop me a DM. I'll be happy to link you to the survey so you can rate it yourself. Um, but they actually looked at extroversion in relation to DS dominance. We're not taking a business study and trying to extrapolate it into the world of DS. This was actually researchers looking at extroversion and dominance. And they found that there is no link between extroverts and dominance. What actually matters are the traits of the people involved and not social traits, things like assertiveness, decisiveness, and having a level of self confidence in themselves. And these traits exist outside of introversion or extroversion. And leadership skills are they're well, not they are unrelated to one's, shall we say, social identity or the vibe they give off. Um, they also found that introverts are extremely capable dominants um, because they seem to have an intense sense of presence. They can be focused, undivided, and put that focused and undivided attention onto their partner. And they're also very selective in who they develop connections with. So that was sort of fascinating, and it found that, of course, that this is not the exclusive realm of the magnetic extroverts. Um, and then continuing on to look at just the magnetic side of the myth. Now that we know the extrovert part is been disproven, a couple of researchers, Costa and McRae, in 1992, um, they looked at whether dominance was sort of a universal role, um, and whether dominance required sort of that magnetism. And they found that once again, across the board, people who are dominant can be introverted, they can be quiet, they can be socially low key. Dominance is not a personality category. And this is backed up by Pascal's research in 2015 that showed that people involved in BDSM are adopting roles that fit their own individual preferences. It is not a something where they are getting picked by personality traits. Um, and there is no stereotypical person that is submissive or stereotypical extroverted magnetic that are dominant or switches. Same thing there. Um, and they found that there's a whole variety, runs the gamut, just like everybody, just like people in general do, in diversity among people who identify as dominants. And one of the things, of course, that always gets talked about is a dominant having confidence. And once again, what this research showed is that confidence, especially in this way, in the world of DS and kink, that confidence is contextual. It's not universal. And what I mean by that is um, confidence comes in perhaps who you are or what you want in a relationship or that you're going to lead your partner. It doesn't mean you're confident in everything all the time. In fact, just like everybody else, research shows that confidence is going to sort of rise and fall depending on somebody's experience level with things. For example, you could take the super confident dominant and put him into a brand new work environment, and he's going to be perhaps less confident in that. And I apologize, I just used masculine pronouns for dominant rather than what I should be doing, which is gender neutral because roles are available to anyone. So I apologize for my slip up there. But confidence is very much, in the context of what is being done. And dominance, just like everyone else, will have areas in their life that they are more confident in and other areas where they are less confident in. And confidence, of course, ebbs and flows as we go with things. Sometimes we can be very confident, and other times life can happen and sort of shake our confidence. Um, Maybe not perhaps in ourselves sometimes, definitely, but in what we're doing, especially if we're trying or learning something new. Um, Now, looking specifically at magnetism, Grant, Gino, and Hoffman, and this survey or this study goes back to 2011. found that magnetism is not a prerequisite to be a leader. Um, and in fact, um, their their research and other research as well showed that introverted leaders actually outperform extroverted ones. And this is looking at a study as far as leaders in the business world, not specific leaders as far as in a DS relationship. But leadership is leadership, whether you are leading your team at work or leading your partner privately. So the research showed that effective leaders, they can be introverted, analytical, they can be understated, they can be extroverted, but surprisingly, those that identified as introverted typically scored higher with leadership. And getting specific to BDSM in 2012, Yost and Hunter, and a few other sexologists, um, they looked at the personality types exclusively of dominance and found that, once again, just like everything else, dominants run the range. Soft spoken to bold, some more nurturing, some more commanding. It's not just magnetic or people that are high in charisma that are dominants. It's all about creating that connection with your partner or partners that works. And power exchange is something that is it's negotiated. It is not something that arrives through a sort of personality flash. Magnetic extrovert doesn't walk into the room and somebody who is submissive go, oh, and just, immediately, go into all of that. It's something that gets negotiated. It takes time. There's trust. And no matter your personality type, yes, relationships, they rely on communication, emotional, being able to manage your emotions, respecting boundaries and limits, empathy. All of these things are nothing to do with a personality type or, say, your aura. So that is kind of, honestly, disproves it. And plus, the skills for a DS relationship or even regular relationship skills, they're actually skills which we learn, we can grow, we can practice and get better at. It's not something that you are, say, born with or you just have them naturally. Um, and the biggest thing that researchers found is that the extroverted dominant or the extroverted magnetic dominant, these are all born out of the way society perceives or better yet presents DS to, say, the masses. If you look at how you see DS relationships reflected on the silver screen or your TV set at home, chances are the dominant is going to be extroverted, magnetic, and, sort of that, 50 shades of crap that Hollywood keeps jamming down our throats. And that is where this myth comes from. And it's very easy to buy into, to see, and to believe that because what we see is the reality, and that is definitely not the case. Now, some specific ways that this mythology is presented to us, or that you will probably see it posted online or see it talked about. Um, the first one is all dominance, and this, of course, is a huge red flag whenever we say all or true or real. But dominance and DS have magnetic, charismatic, alpha energy presence. Um, the reality is that, you know, dominance is a negotiated role, it's not a personality type. The research clearly shows that assertiveness and dominance are not tied to charisma or extroversion or being magnetic. Dominants can be soft spoken, they can be introverted, they can be thoughtful, they can be analytical, and still be amazing dominants for the right partner. The next one is that dominance seems to come naturally to people who have commanding and outgoing personality. And the reality is, confidence is context dependent. Um, depending on what we're doing, there are certain things in our lives where we can have an incredible amount of confidence. And then there are other areas where we don't have that confidence. And I truly believe that anybody who says that they're always confident in themselves all the time, um, they're hiding something somewhere. Um, and it's one of those things where it all depends on what we're doing and our own individual confidence level in that. If you take a highly confident person and you give them a new skill, they might be confident that they will master the skill. However, starting out, they're not going to be confident they're going to be able to deliver a strong result to start with. Um, and this is another big one. Dominants are leaders in every aspect of their life. I'm certain most of you have heard that before, and that is so not true. There are dominants who are not leaders at work, or maybe they're not a leader on a sports team they play in, or in their group of vanilla friends. They're not the leader of the pack, so to speak, but in their relationship, they are the leader. You don't have to be the leader of everything to be a dominant. And in fact, the research of Grant, Gino, and Hoffman, once again, they showed that introverted leaders can be just as effective, if not more effective, than extroverted one. And oftentimes you'll find relationships where personalities complement each other, like mine and Sailor's. Our personality types complement each other. We do very well with that. So, leadership in DS is not about being the loudest person in the room. It's not about being the most outgoing person in the room or even being the magnetic person in the room. It's all about how you interact with your partner. The next one is that dominants are naturally commanding and they don't need to communicate much because they're just naturally commanding. And yes, in a DS relationship, especially one that has gone on for quite a while, it's long term, you can share a look that conveys 1,000 words. However, you can't share a look and communicate everything. Telepathy isn't necessarily real. You still have to sit down and have conversations. You have to talk things out. You have to have communication skills, not just charisma. Charisma doesn't cut it. You actually have to be able to communicate with your partner in ways that work. And then, yes, you can have a look that shares, like I said, 1,000 words, but you still need to be able to back that look up with those 1,000 words so there aren't any misunderstandings from a look or the look. Um, and once again, these have no relationship to having a charismatic, magnetic personality. Um, and like we saw or like I saw on that post, dominance always have a magnetic personality. And if they don't have that magnetic personality, that person is not a real dominant. And, as we've gone through and said, magnetism has zero to do with roles in BDSM. There are quiet dominance, there's nurturing dominance, there's analytical dominance, there's loud commanding dominance. It's all about how people connect and what works. Um, So it is not true that a dominant must be magnetic, or that if you're a dominant, you are therefore magnetic. That is just not the case. And finally, we are going to come to my favorite myth about this whole outgoing magnetic dominant thing. And it's something you may have heard before, heard variants of it, but it goes like this. The magnetic, outgoing dominant just walks into a room, and submissives and even people who are submissive but don't know they're submissive, or maybe you're not in the lifestyle, because of that energy and that magnetism, they all just swoon. And it's like, they just can't. It doesn't work like that. Now, yes, when you meet somebody for the first time and there's that romantic spark that can happen, there can be some swooning that happens on both sides, the dominant side and the submissive side. However, that doesn't happen to every submissive in the room when a magnetic, outgoing dominant walks in, because that doesn't exist. A dominant can be have a magnetic personality. They can be outgoing, but they're not going to make every submissive or somebody who doesn't even know they're submissive swoon as soon as they walk into a room. And the research actually points to that many submissives, typically after that initial spark, whatever it is that sparks that initial attraction, um, they respond best to presence, consistency, trust, and clarity in their conversations with a dominant or prospective dominant, which is really no surprise. But those are much more important than, oh, they made me swoon. And yes, there is a bit of swooning at the beginning of a relationship, um, but that's that spark. It isn't a swoon. So
So,
here there are a few things that I hope that you'll take away from our conversation today. And the first is that really dominance is not a personality type. You don't need to be extroverted to be a dominant. You don't need to be magnetic to be a dominant. Just be yourself. There's a place for you as you are in the lifestyle. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to be the stereotypical extrovert. You can be quiet. You can be unassuming. You can be analytical. No matter what is you, just be you, and you will be absolutely perfect for the right partner in DS. Because power exchange relationships, they're built on trust, communication, respect, presence. Charisma is not part of the relationship lexicon when it comes to DS, because dominance and submission are what you create it to be for yourself, not what other people say, especially when they start throwing those real dominants or real submissives, true dominants, all those sort of must have gatekeeping terms out there. You don't have to be outgoing, you don't have to be that extrovert. The lifestyle has room, and it's just a matter of finding your place and finding your people within that room. So please, whatever you are, if you're analytical, be analytical. If you're nurturing, be nurturing. If you're bold, be bold. And if you're charismatic, be charismatic. There is room for you, and you are welcome. No matter your role in the lifestyle, or even just being kinky, you can authentically be yourself and be here. And finally, I want to ask that no matter where you're watching or listening, please go ahead and tap the like button or even the subscribe button. That would be fabulous. And especially do that if you could tap that thumbs up on YouTube. I'm new on the channel there, and it helps sort of the algorithm know that I am not screaming off into the void. So I would appreciate that very much. And if you happen to know somebody that what we talked about here today would help them, please go ahead and share this with them. That would be fabulous. And if you do have any questions or concerns or want the details on what studies I looked at for this, just drop me a DM and I'll be more than happy to share them. So, on that note, I will chat with everyone again in 2 weeks.